All right, so thanks for showing up today, you guys. My name is Joelle Marier. I am the Executive Director of the National Wilderness Stewardship Alliance. We're really excited to have you all here for this webinar. So some quick housekeeping before we jump into Lynne's presentation. There will be time for questions at the end. I think Lynne is also planning to do some discussion, so we'll ask you to unmute yourselves when that time comes. But if you have questions during her presentation, please place them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible during the Q&A. If we do end up with some lively discussion and we're getting close to the top of the hour, we've got about 15 minutes reserved at the end for any extra time needed. Out of respect for our presenter and other participants, please mute your microphone throughout the webinar until we're in the Q&A session or during Lynne's discussion that she wants to have. So with this, we'll get started. Today, I am happy to welcome Lynne Westerfield. Lynne is the Stewardship Program Director at Wild Arizona, where she helps their Wild Stew field crews accomplish a range of backcountry maintenance projects, and she directs many of Wild Arizona's watershed and habitat restoration projects. Lynne is also a Grand Canyon River guide and founded the Cloud City Consideration Center in Leadville, Colorado. She's joining us today to tell us about an awesome StoryMap project completed by Wild Arizona to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Gila Wilderness this year and showcase the newly created Gila Centennial Trail. So thanks so much for joining us today, Lynne, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and see if I can pull up the story map, and then I'll get started talking. I wanted to say I'm honored to be here sharing the story map, and we're really grateful to NWSA for funding the project. I learned a lot from this. I'm not a graphics person, I'm not a web person, and I love what we came up with. I'm happy to say that the most important things I learned from it weren't in ArcGIS, although I did learn how to do a lot of ArcGIS. So really, I'm a perfect showcase for, anyone can figure out how to do it. Okay, I'm going to start by sharing. Let's see if this works. Sharing the screen. And here's how you get to the map. This is our webpage, www.wildarizona.org. Let's see if I can. It's funny, I can't click on it because it's like underneath the Zoom thing. So you click on our main page. Let's go back to there. That's our main page. Story maps right in the middle. And then, sorry, I keep having to move it around on my screen because you guys are on it or underneath it. And then I like to view it on ArcGIS, not on our website. So I click right there. You just get a bigger picture that way. And I'm actually going to push play before I put it on the big screen because again, you guys are over it. I mean, you're on top of it. Your little videos are on top of it. I'm going to turn autoplay on and just get started doing a little talking. So there's an autoplay function on story maps. And I apologize if I'm telling you things you already know. I don't think most people do the autoplay function. But it's kind of cool. It looks like a little like mini slideshow. And I like it because it gives you kind of an overview of it. So I was going to let it play while I talk a little bit and then look at some specific parts of it. Okay. So I want to show you the story map. But I also want to talk about the process of making it and what we learned about the Gila, its people, the wild things in the Gila, and the process of making a story map. So we were funded by NWSA last year to create a story map that would celebrate the Gila Wilderness Centennial Trail in advance of the Centennial Celebration in the Gila. This addresses the WSP element education, and it's in partnership with New Mexico Wild that is also working on the education element. They did the Gila Education Plan, which this is an outreach piece that's a part of that plan. the Gila National Forest was interested in doing engaging outreach on a story map that would highlight this newly minted Gila Centennial Trail, which, as you likely know, is just a connection of trails that were already there. Our organization, Wild Arizona, runs field crews, like Joelle said, our Wild Stew field crews. And we were working in the Gila during this time. Actually, that's a picture of our field crew right there, which is one of my favorites. We worked on the Crest Trail, the Whitewater Baldy Trail, the Hold Apache Trail. All of these are very remote. This is us using the crosscut right there. Uh, and it was a wonderful way to get to know the Gila, um, and gave us a sense of what we were talking about, which was nice. The story we were trying to tell. So, what was important for us in taking on this project was to use the story map as a medium to celebrate wilderness, but not just any wilderness, this wilderness in particular, its amazing history, its rugged terrain, Aldo Leopold being the first wilderness. But we also wanted to give light to a different story and a narrative of wilderness, one that's non-dualistic, including humans among the animals living in wilderness areas. And we sometimes think of this as an indigenous perspective, but it's also the perspective of many of us non-indigenous folks. And it's a story worth telling. I feel it's a narrative that people talk about now, definitely the non-dualism or the idea of taking dualism out of the Wilderness Act. I feel like it's part of the conversation, but it's a story worth telling. And we wanted to be able to tell it along with how important wilderness is, that protection is. Um, we work with indigenous partners in Arizona in the Colorado River region. We've partnered with the Hopi tribe to do some really neat films and work on the Little Colorado. We have partnered with Navajo Nation in doing restoration on the Colorado River, but we had never worked with any of the tribes in the Gila, and we didn't know them. And this is a real problem. If you want to tell a story, you're hoping to show an indigenous perspective, and you don't have a relationship with them. And unfortunately, it's a common problem. We're often trying to tell a story without knowing the voice that's central to it. So yeah, it's not just Wild Arizona's problem. It's a problem that we all deal with. What we ended up doing, and this is a spoiler, by the way, is forgetting about the goals of the story map and just getting to know and hang out with and work with and play with our new native acquaintances, which is the Fort Sill Apache tribe, the descendants of Warm Springs and Chiricahua Apache, who were held as prisoners of war by the United States from 1886 to 1914. They found us when we were bumbling around searching for stories, and they were able to tell us what it meant to them to be a federally recognized tribe. As part of this project, which includes a volunteer component, thanks to NWSA, we ran a 6-day field camp with the Fort Sill Apache youth in the Gila National Forest, where we did watershed restoration. I'm going to show you a little bit more about that camp at the end of looking through the story map. And you'll find that we got a lot of help from the Fort Sill Apache and others in writing the story map, but what we learned at the field camp isn't necessarily in here, and that's what I love to get your thoughts, everybody's thoughts on how we can include it, but a little more on that later. All right, so the process of making the story map. We started this project with Kyle Granby from the Gila National Forest and the Wilderness Centennial Outreach Committee, which included New Mexico Wild, the Backcountry Horsemen. We came up with themes that were also used by New Mexico Wild in the kiosks they were creating. The themes were meant to be brought up throughout the story map. What's really important to the Gila Wilderness and the Centennial. And we came up with wilderness history, ecology, fire, indigenous voices, and visiting with care or responsible visiting. We then came up with the wireframe, or what I call just an outline for the story map. If anybody wants to see this, I would be happy to share it because it was a critical piece to creating the story map. But it's just sort of an outline of what you're going to say, the pictures, the videos, where you can edit it before you put it all onto the story map itself. You guys may be familiar with that structure. Um, so how we organized it, we took first a map itself, and I'm going to go ahead and stop. Ooh, maybe I'll see if, I wonder if when you play it, oh, it didn't run through. Interesting. I'm going to stop this and show you the map again. Let me just, there, we're going to go up to the map. So we started with a map, a background map here, and other story maps use ArcGIS's version of a map, which is pretty basic. You can zoom in and out of it, but you're sort of limited in what you can put on that. Instead of doing that, we used this map that the Gila National Forest had come up with, which was very detailed, and we have a link to that map itself if someone wants to really look into the trails. As Joelle and I were doing before you guys got on this call, we were looking at the specifics of both of our last backpacking trips into the Gila, which is exactly what this map is meant to be for. But this is the guided tour version. So we started with this map, and then we took key feature points. And a lot of people helped us to identify those. Philip Walrod, especially from the Wilderness District in the Gila, Backcountry Horsemen, other partners, Fort Sill Apache helped us with this as well. And our themes are shown sort of throughout these different blocks. So I said fire was one of our themes, so I'm sorry, I hope you don't get whiplash here, driving around the old Centennial Trail. But I'm gonna go to one of our fire. Oops, I'm gonna put it on the whole screen first. You guys can tell me if I'm messing this up. Okay, I'm going to go to one of our fire points and just read you a little bit about it because I feel very excited to get to share this with you. So fire was one of our themes. So we marked a place where there's a high severity burn. For our field crews, what that means is there's a lot of logs across the trail that we end up cutting out with crosscut, which is great. But just to read you this one, and we came up with this with the help of Philip Walrod and the Wilderness District. As you walk through this section, scarred by high intensity fire in 2012, you'll find blackened skeleton trees and new growth of ferns. High severity fires can cook the soil, slowing down forest regeneration, but regeneration doesn't stop altogether. You may also see New Mexico locust, a nitrogen fixing plant that helps forests rebuild again. So this is just one of the feature points that highlights fire. I happen to like this one in particular because I like the way it talks about regeneration and the struggles with high intensity fires. Ecology, well, let's go to our crosscut again before I go to ecologies because I really like watching us crosscut. Woo, there we go. Yeah. Okay, ecology, we've got a lot of ecology feature points here. One of my favorites is alligator junipers because I just love alligator junipers, so I'm going to go back to that one. And you guys are welcome to put in a chat if you want me to go to any particular one of these points. This is a place along the trail where you're going to see big alligator junipers, but there's a lot of places along the trail where you see really old junipers, up to 800 years old. You know, the largest species of juniper found in the Southwest, and they're the slowest growing as well. They live a very, very long time, have that distinctive checker bark that we love, or alligator skin bark, native to southwestern United States. And one thing we've noted here, which is an important thing to note about alligator junipers, is that these big old trees are important to forest ecology because they have a large number of cavities providing nesting sites for birds and mammals, which significantly increase in junipers over 300 years. So there's an ecology feature. We've got lots of other features on there. I think we've got Gila trout. We've got the chub featured, several fish featured in there. All right. So this is kind of the map section where you go through the map tour. Then we have a few blocks that are just talking about different aspects of the Gila. I'm going to scroll through wilderness history. We got some Aldo Leopold journals, which you may recognize. We've got the very first proposal that he submitted for the Gila to be a wilderness area. We, of course, have the Wilderness Act. And we tried to, give voice to, again, a non-dualistic perspective. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of this now. Um, yeah, and then we'll move on. But before recorded history and into recorded time, for American Indians and other indigenous peoples, humans lived as a part of the natural world. They were of the wilderness. I'm going to skip a little. And then in the ensuing 2 decades, indigenous community members and tribal leaders have worked hard to bring their place into this wilderness narrative forward into the present tense to tell their own cultural stories of continuous and living connection to these ancestral cultural landscapes. The urgency for them to speak out is elevated when the wildlands and waters of their traditional homelands and even their present communities face ever expanding threats from mining and development. Um, yeah, okay. Well, this is all in the wilderness history section. There's some really interesting research that shows that the places we consider the most wild had been strongly linked historically to land use by indigenous peoples. I think that's a very interesting correlation. We've got a section with Indigenous voices, and these are youth that have taken part in our watershed restoration programs. I'm just going to read you one of these because I love it. It's worth looking at all of them. They're really great. But this is Sequoia, and here's what she says. We just asked, what does wilderness mean to you? And here's what she said. I feel like it's just peaceful, the ability to just go off and be yourself somewhere without the thought of being yourself. It makes you want to take care of it. Now that's what Sequoia had to say. Sequoia is Diné, Navajo Nation. Um, let's see. I might read you just one little bit on ecology because there's so much here. We couldn't even touch on it. The mystery of the Gila through ecology, but I particularly love humpback chubs and other chubs, the fish that are native to the area, the mighty native fish that have co-evolved with the floods, rapids, and sediment of the riverine landscape. Awesome, also often fearsome predators. They are the chubs, including the Gila chub, named after the Gila River, and the bony tail, humpback, roundtail, and headwaters chubs. We've got some pictures of them actually on the map, which is nice. In our fire section, I wanted to show you a little bit about what the Fort Sill Apache helped us with. We, did a lot of research on, different approaches to fire, and this has come out of it. The Apache peoples, extrapolating to Apache people from White Mountain Apache people, used fire to gather, garden, and hunt primarily, sometimes setting fires to lure deer and elk to particular places. When we talked about this with the Fort Sill Apache, they pointed out, and rightly so, that this is actually used to say people and not peoples, is that the Apache are many different peoples and tribes, and that this author was likely extrapolating from a Mountain Apache because that's what he'd mentioned earlier. And this may not be what all Apache people do, but it's sort of an extrapolation from White Mountain Apache people. So it was a good lesson in language, not to talk about all the tribes as one, particularly Apache. Um, okay. Here's one other cool part of our story map. So this is the only thing we really had to contract out for because it was actually ArcGIS. And we had a really sweet recent graduate who was really into ArcGIS who wanted to help us out here. And what this does for the story map is shows you all the trails and say you're wanting to do, a particular section. We can look at Let's look at, say you're starting in kind of the classic spot where the road comes up and you want to go up to White Rocks and you click on that section here. It'll show you an elevation profile, how long it is, and you can go in further to look at the route itself. You can also see from this is an ArcGIS template, and so it's actually less detailed than, say, the Gila National Forest map that we give folks to download. So it's kind of interesting what you're limited to in ArcGIS and also what you can do with it. All right. Okay, oh, I guess I have to show you. Let's see if I can even get there since we moved that. Okay. Um, Visiting with care in the Gila. And it's funny, Joelle and I only had a couple minutes to talk about the Gila Centennial Trail, but it is rugged and there are parts that are not well maintained, and you need to have route finding skills. And that's the first thing that we talk about here, at the behest of the Gila Wilderness Rec staff. Really wanted to make sure we talked about that. We also talk about different leave no trace principles here. Okay, so what I wanted to share with you is, we were once we learned that we didn't know what we were talking about as far as the different local tribes, the Fort Sill Apache, we started to build a relationship with them, and we ran this field camp for a week where they helped us to do watershed restoration in the Gila National Forest. And I wanted to show you just a little slideshow and some pictures from that. And you can help me figure out what to do with them. The last thing we wanted to do was use them um, sort of lightly on the internet or for marketing purposes. Not that this is marketing, it's education, but I'm going to just play this and tell you a little bit about the field camp. What NWSA allowed us to do uh, is to help pay for transportation costs. The Gila National Forest paid for a lot of this field camp, but without helping to cover transportation costs, resources for camping, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So what we did on this field camp is as far as watershed restoration, we collected blue willow saplings on site. We planted them on the banks of the creek to eventually bring shade to the creek, lowering the temperature, which helps to create habitat for fish, especially the endangered loach minnow. We also studied a nearby spring, collecting macroinvertebrates, analyzing them for stream health. We caught crayfish. That's Dexter in the front from Rod, Arizona there. And we did some trail work on a little nearby trail. So that's everybody. I guess I should move your, since you guys can see my screen, you can also see you there. Yeah, it was a really great field camp, and I feel like we're only, beginning to sort of understand, the perspective of any tribe. But it was a great experience, and I learned a lot myself. I can remember sitting around the dinner table, eating chili that we'd all made, and one of the kids, Jaden, was sort of explaining why he liked projects like this and why he liked volunteering back home. And he said, I want to be more of a circle person. And I knew exactly what he meant. And I felt the same way. So anyway, it was just a great experience. Let me go ahead and stop it now, and we'll go back to the story map. And I think that's about all I have got for you on the sharing. I feel like you've gotten a taste of what the map is. And we can move on to questions.